Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back from lunch here at TMU. Welcome back from lunch. Those of you that are joining us online, we have a wonderful, exciting program for this afternoon, and I'm going to turn it over directly to Linda Kulkarni to introduce our special guest speaker.
Yeah. Thanks, Janet. It's my delight and pleasure to be introducing Letitia Alma Deawuo Alma. Alma's a former Executive Director of SeedChange and a really good friend of GRAN. She's played such a significant role in this past year in our Right to Food campaign, both as a presenter at GRAN, part of the GTA panel presentation, and through numerous Zoom meetings, telephone calls, and helping us understand food security, food sovereignty, and what we can do together. And we have certainly partnered so wonderfully over this last year. So great to have you here, Alma. A little bit of background on Alma. She's a leading activist for food justice with more than 50 years of grassroots and organizational experience in the food movement. She offers a rich perspective and expertise in food sovereignty, agroecology, and food justice, thanks to her childhood spent on a small-scale farm in Ghana, and her many years working here in Toronto in the Jane and Fitch community as an organizer and leader for food justice in her work with the Black Creek Community Farm. In 2022, Alma completed her master's degree at York University, looking at how decolonialization, agroecology, and the experience of women elders in small-scale farming communities can support much-needed shifts in the way we think of our relationship with each other and with other living beings. Please join me in welcoming you all.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I'm happy to be here. It feels like I was here just last year, even though I know I have not met many of you as yet. Thank you again for having me. I thought how I would like to start this is I have a short film. It's a rough cut, unedited film. It's a conversation with my grandmother. And maybe before I start, I want to give a shout out to my mother over there. And a happy Mother's Day to everyone. We're going to take the whole month. We need the whole year, but we'll take a month, no?
Yeah.
So maybe to start a little bit, I decided to do a film because I've been working a lot in agriculture, urban agriculture, food justice issues for quite some time. And as I grow and I learn in this work, I learn the role of women in agriculture and the fact that women, like my grandmother, are not sitting at policy decision tables. My grandmother is not the type of person that I think politicians will want to call and talk to about the soil or about the land and how to take care of it. But she holds so much knowledge. And if women, the ones growing on a small scale of land, are actually protecting over 70% of the world's biodiversity, why are they not at the table? So for me, it was important to go back to sit with my grandmother, to unlearn and relearn from her the many ways that she has stewarded the lands that she's on, but also how she have used that to not only feed herself and her children, but to also feed her community. When I started this journey into this film, a man actually reached out to me on social media and said, when I was younger, your grandmother fed me in the village. She had a chop bar, which is a small roadside shop, and she sold kukunte, I don't know how to describe it in English, but it's a very delicious meal made with peanut soup. And, young people will come to her and sometimes you just tell them, go fetch me water and you can have food to eat. So her work was not only about herself and her family, but it was also about taking care of her community as well. And so I will let the film speak for itself. Again, this is not a Netflix film. At all. You're looking at an amateur filmmaker here, someone who is just very passionate about making film but has no experience whatsoever in doing so. But this is a conversation with my grandmother, and I decided not to do a voiceover for this film, but to allow her to speak for herself, because I think that's very, very important that she shares her story. And I know as audience, you may take from it in many different ways, and that's all part of the dialogue, and that's all part of the learning. So when the film is done, I am happy to elaborate a little bit more and to have conversations with you on this work. Thank you.
Okay, I'm ready, Papa. Yeah, we here, it's Mr. Buma one. I don't never buy some Yedima. The Yedima is a overlook. The Mito Papa. Mr. Man, Yedima is a coming while I raise a net in my show. You can wear it. The one woman whom I could take. You come. You be a. If you're full of one and you, and you actually what I mean. Inquiry doing now, school. My school no go school to say, only the another thing is going come. When the man video. You no, I need to pay them. I will get the internet, you get the it's on dear papa. It's on dear papa. No, it's on dear papa. You got in near the money. What you see, I don't know what I just got on for being ready. And what you do, my head. Oh, is a British guy, yeah, I hear one, there was a pro, you need to know me, and I do for the Kayan. Woman and good daddy. Over now with the water. There are powerful. Young and job. Young, or 3 good, Yasa. But I mean, show not the man. 那在美吗？我在妈妈叫我就做上本来的呀，本来不是啥别的。咱们是我不滚蛋呐，我看你说我不要我们说不滚蛋，我滚说我是滚蛋，我也是要讲讲，我也是要把样大点好吧。我们稍微年轻嘛，你说他干不？真行啊，他把啥比赛下也讲的话，他真是的，在干那个服，你过来真是的，在干那个服，你过来这不。
Once a month, I think it's going to Punyawo Kuma and ask me to think about. You don't get on Kuma Banjimia. You are the Bible can say the Bible for you to be open. You didn't make it. You go, that's what you can about then I wait for an act or your bunches. You have to no mangiavo mangiavo non già si dice che io penso che non è una cosa simile non lo fanno nei film e che oggi che già mangiare che non lo devo dire mi devo capire che mangiare tutto di and I need to know spray Ghanaian. Yeah, and yet I need to do it. You are not better. About those young universities, the door of the junior, on there. You don't want to play the answer. You are just a woman. You never be on a lady. If you didn't, you are a you to play the university. And I said, you want to do that. And okay, say no name a comedy cook from because only Diana. Medium to bring the medium. But it's also a little for the hour. What are you say? Me a million. I'm not, but it's million. You know, my people for good room to pay now. Oh, have you? Oh, have you need to pay for me? Now you will forget it. You know, you go for the day. You will have a week and put the telephone. The first day. We are in the number of years in the day. You know, there. The other. So, one day, we see that. You are you never go for the world. You tell you people don't know the system now. What they not now, and that means I want to mean different for the area.
Yeah, what in natural food. The way we come up, the drum as I am, I am every bubble I could say, nothing will be black, never. The kind beer body, would you be proper, won't say as in trouble? The never remember, my green island, you had it. I'm a green pine, a high cacao. You think good on that, yes. You know now. Whenever managing what is it clean? When you're not going to my going back over you. Once you have one thing, you too, what it is. You do, and I know this one thing will do me. About the reason to them, yes. Body and apple and family, you're living and you want to take a It is our primary own, not in the island, say in your friends. We are friends. Then we are really disagree. It's a good. We look at the whole way of meeting. Oh, no, that. I was a big one. And there would come a bar and get on the ground was in the for me. We come a bar and get on. Dia become a banner, or become a banner, one part so, another day in the same. So, in the very time on the kind of thing, the very was
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Since finishing my master's, I haven't really shown this film to a lot of people because it's rough, it's not quite edited well, but it's very personal for me, and I thought this will be a great audience to kind of share the stories of my grandmother. And I think one thing to know, we call my grandmother Afua DC. DC standing for Disciplinary Committee. We call her DC because, you know, she's the whole committee in one. And most of the men, the chiefs in town knows not to mess with my grandmother. But I think one important piece to share on this film is that it's also the role of patriarchy. I don't know if you caught on when she was talking about farming with her husband. The husband takes the produce to sell somewhere. He won't come back. He will stay there, spend the money, and then come home. But it also speaks in context to what's happening globally, where men tend to focus on cash crops and crops that are, in terms of how it's grown, it's very detrimental in terms of the impact that it has on the environment. But women tend to focus on growing food to feed their families and to care for their community, and they tend to grow more varieties of food. Again, preserving the agricultural biodiversity that they have. And they also tend to grow in the forest floor. So one of the things I wanted to show in the film was to kind of show that, you know, in Ghana, the majority of farmers have to travel quite a bit to the forest to grow their food. And they farm with the ecosystem that's there. Right? So there isn't heavy machinery to sort of clear the land. A lot of it, yes, is backbreaking because imagine holding a whole, like clearing the weeds for quite some time. It is backbreaking. It is hard work. And I think that's one of the things that people really need to appreciate about farming. It's not easy at all, but these women do it. And in small ways, like my grandmother, this is how women have been protecting our environment globally. And I think that's very, very important to acknowledge. When you sit with my grandmother and you talk about different crops, you talk about the soil, she has so much knowledge. I see her as not only a professor, a doctor, a scientist, but someone who holds the Mother Earth and stewards it quite well. And I think her story deserved to be told, from her own words. This is why, for me, it was very important. And I think when I was working with a friend on this film, I said, I don't want to speak over her words and try to capture it in my Western language. I want her to say it in the ways that she feels comfortable. And the little subtitle you saw there was me trying to capture what she's saying in there as well. So I think, as you think about the food that's in your table, as you think about the environment, as you think about the planet, and to think about women like my grandmother. And she's not the only woman that I met. There were also other grandmothers that I met throughout Ghana who will get up early in the morning. Their kids in the city have sent the grandkids to them in the village, and they have to care for the children and then go to the farm. The children will come and meet them at the farm. Then they will help them cultivate the land and then come back. So grandmothers who are playing very crucial roles in raising of their grandchildren and essentially of their community. So yeah, that's power to my grandmother, and I will leave it there for questions. Thanks. Yes.
I'm just wondering, she refers quite a few times to the spraying. Who's doing the spraying? And what are they spraying? Because it sounds like it's really detrimental to what they're growing and also the trees around and so on.
So they're spraying chemical fertilizers. Most of the brands that I saw were like glyphosate and others. She calls it spray because the government sort of agents that come into the community, they tell them spray, right? It's a spray for your farm. So she uses the English word spray to describe that. With urbanization and a lot of young people leaving the villages, for a better life in the city, it means that a lot of the elders are left in the village having to figure out how to take care of the land. So instead of solving the issue of poverty, deforestation, and what's driving young people out of the communities, the corporations always come up with a brilliant idea, which is the chemical fertilizers. You don't need to weed anymore. You can just spray them. And the detriment it has is that, the medicine, I was talking to a medicine woman who said, I am not even able to find medicine around anymore because they call them all weeds and they spray them. Right? So everything is sprayed, and you see for yourself some of the impact that it has on the land. So in the northern part of Ghana, where a man was showing me, he's like, this land 3 years ago, I was able to grow tomatoes and it did well. Since the introduction of the chemicals, you can't even grow anything here anymore. So yes, you will get your yields for a short period of time, but it doesn't guarantee food security or food sovereignty for that community in the long term. And I think on the conversation of chemical fertilizers and even genetically modified food, one of the things that I think most people in the public don't think about is the fact that how much farmers globally are in debt to corporations, right? You need the chemicals, you got to go back. You need the seeds, you got to go back. Right? It's not the old way where people are able to share and work with the land anymore. And I'm sure you've heard about the suicides of farmers in India, right? Similar model where farmers are so indebted that literally their land is where the family land is where it's put for collateral, right? So now if these banks or businesses come and say, okay, you can't pay your debt, now we're going to take the family land. It carries so much shame, right? The farmers end up taking their lives. So I think a lot of the time around the conversation of chemical fertilizers and GMOs, we forget the people that grow our food, that they are the most impacted by it all, whether it's the health, getting cancer, getting sick from, their close proximity to the chemicals and the impact, of course, that it has on the planet, on the environment, but most importantly, the debt, right? Monsanto comes to you and say, well, guess what? That seed you have, you are not going to be able to share it. You can sell it. You can do this with it because I own the gene that's in that particular seed. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we're having right now and one of the barriers to our global food security. Yes.
When I was in northern,
So I think it's.
when I was in northern Ghana, in 2016, we were very north. We could not find hardly any food to eat. That was any good. Like the oranges, I know they don't grow oranges there, but I believe they were shipping them up before in trucks. But they were like tennis balls. You couldn't even eat them. And plantain was hard to get. So I just don't understand how they're managing at all, because it just looks like desert everywhere out there now. And I know the one person who has a farm, she does have it far away, and I didn't realize it was because there's probably trees there, right? Because now there's no trees anywhere. I don't know if you can speak to that issue about not being able to find food, even when you have the money and you go to the market.
Thank you. I think I'm trying to sort of sum up the challenge and also the hopes that's in northern Ghana. I think one of the beautiful things about northern Ghana is that because systemically northern Ghana has been largely ignored by the Ghanaian government, they've been able to preserve some of the seeds in comparison to the South, from my own observation and from some of the seed security assessments that we did in Ghana. They have so many different varieties of seeds in northern Ghana in comparison to the South, because the South is much more heavily Western influenced and the North not so much. There's a bigger challenge because if, up to 70% of the population in the North deals with poverty, which is quite huge. Access to food is a big barrier. Access to water, access to arable land to be able to grow is also one of the big challenges that people in the North face and deal with. And ironically, if you see some beading, even this clothes I'm wearing, this bag that I see there, I know you probably got it from somewhere else, but all the arts, all the craft things comes mostly from the north of Ghana. And shea butter, if you know shea butter, and I've heard of shea butter, is dominantly produced in the north. But the north is largely ignored, is exploited, but not much investment actually goes into building that community up. So some places in the north that you're describing are facing quite dire situations. And then some, like the one that SeedChange partners with in Bolgatanga, yes, some farmers face challenges. There's so much hope in the sense that they have so many varieties of different seeds, right? That is still their own. And it's just working with some of the young people around how you can still grow land and make the soil fertile again to be able to grow enough food for themselves. But there's a deeper political conversation as well that we don't have time for, but I would love to discuss with you too a little bit in terms of how northern Ghana came to be where it is right now, and the huge disparity in terms of the rich and the poor. Yeah, I think somebody had a question over here. Oh, sorry. The mic is somewhere.
Does SeedChange operate in other African countries, or is it mostly? Okay.
Yes, so East Africa, so Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Kenya. And then Mali, no, not Uganda, not yet. Mali, and then Ghana. Yeah. Right behind you.
Thank you.
You said you didn't want to get into the discussion of politics but my question is, as people are getting organized and beginning to find out what some of the barriers are that they want to break down in order to feed themselves and their communities and restore the land and all that. How receptive is government, or are they in the pockets of the monocultural agriculture companies and the people who are wealthy and want to stay wealthy? Are there any avenues that are moving from farmers and communities that are working together cooperatively and trying to improve things? Any avenues between them and responsive government officials there?
That's a very good question. I think one of the pieces with, the Ministry of Agriculture in Ghana is that they tend to lean very heavily on corporations. And a lot of the policies tend to favor really large scale farming. An example is the conversation we're having around the Planting for Food and Jobs. I don't know if you've heard of, it's a government program, millions of dollars, along with, I think, the Canadian government and also the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But if 85% of Ghanaian farmers are farming on 5 acres or less, and you create a program with millions of dollars, and the program is for people planting 5 acres or more, you have basically ignored the large population of farmers in Ghana. And they tend to favor, like programs tend to favor farmers that are doing conventional agriculture. So you can get discounts on fertilizers, you can get imported seeds, right? A lot of the messaging around agriculture, I attended a few agricultural summits in Ghana. It was around, the theme was, the soil is gold, time to make money, and that's the messaging, right? And sometimes I appreciate that kind of very clear messaging to sometimes in the West where it's not clear, they make it seem like it's about sustainability when it isn't. There it's clear. We're here to make money, profit over everything. So when it's being pushed to a lot of young people, get into agriculture because it's profitable. And then you speak to a lot of young folks that are interested in export, not local markets, right? They are all, it's like, I want to plant pineapple because there's a company that will buy the pineapple from me and I'll make lots of money. And it's not necessarily about my community consumes cassava. We are, running out of different cassava varieties. I am going to add to it, yes, make a bit of money because people do need money to live, right? Let's be real. That's not the focus. The focus is about making money. And then you have government policies that are helping to push that, right? So, and I always say, whoever controls the seeds, controls the food, controls the country, controls the people. It's very simple and clear like that. There is no food sovereignty if we are still very reliant on other entities to feed us. And as a country, we're not able to do that. Like, why do we have Brazilian chicken? This is one of the things that baffles my mind all the time, to be in Ghana and you're asking for chicken and they're like, we have Brazilian chicken. I'm like, oh, is the variety of chicken that is from Brazil? They're like, no, it's frozen chicken that has been shipped from Brazil and sold very cheaply, right? And it makes it much more affordable. So if you're selling local chicken, no one wants it.
Yeah, I have a question.
I have a question from Ruth, who's watching it online. What messaging needs to go to our own Canadian government to get them to fund projects that better support these small-scale farmers farming less than 5 acres?
That's a good question. I think there are two things, is looking at the foreign policy that we have as a government. We need to support small scale farmers globally. The messaging is very clear and simple. They are the ones feeding us. It's not corporations. I think when you live in urban centers and big cities, like in Canada, we go to the grocery store, we buy our food. There's a removal, right? We don't get to see who the farmer is or who's actually feeding us. So there's an assumption that Loblaws feeds me, Freshco feeds me, or whatever the name of the shops are, right? Feeds me. And the humanity is removed because we don't see the farmers. And our small scale farmers are doing so much with very little, if any, government subsidy at all, very little. A lot of government research funds conventional agriculture funds larger scale. It doesn't fund small scale farmers. So I think the messaging is quite clear. Let's take care of the people that feed us, because without them, there is no us, right? And I think that goes across the board. In terms of our government's foreign policy and when it comes to international assistance, for instance, the messaging that a lot of NGO groups get, we're told all the time is that Canadians don't care about what's happening out there, right? That's what we're told. They don't care. When it comes to any funding cut, international assistance is on the first to go. And we know that that's not true, that Canadians do care. And I think when it comes to climate change, when it comes to right to food, it's not even that we are taking care of someone else, because I think that's what is seen for the most part. It's like, why are we taking care of someone else when we can't even take care of our own? I don't see it as such as at all. The earth is one. The earth knows no boundaries. What happens there happens here. A flood there, we saw what happened in BC. That's an example, right? We think that climate change can't touch us, but it does. So I think it's about accountability, right? As Canadians, it's also about reciprocity. To make sure that farmers in Canada and farmers in Ghana are all well taken care of, and their rights are respected, and that we don't put corporations' greed above, planetary health and our own health. I think that's really, really important to emphasize. Thanks.
I've heard you mention SeedChange. Could you just speak a little bit about it? I don't know what it is.
Oh, okay, yes, I can mention. So SeedChange is a non-for-profit that's based in Ottawa with almost, no worries, with almost 80 years of service. It was started by Dr. Lana Hitchmanova. It started off as a humanitarian aid organization to where now the main focus is on food sovereignty and seed sovereignty and working on farmers' rights. So if you would like to check them out, is www.weseedchange.org.
Thank you.
Thank you. Linda? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Amma, I wonder, the garden that your grandmother is working on with others, where she lives, does she use it also to feed her community, or is it for just family, or how does that work for her personally?
So my grandmother is not able to farm actively as she used to anymore because of her leg. But in my village, everybody have a garden in their home, and they farm in the forest as well. And it's individuals, but what they do is they share. Like whenever I go visit, even though my grandmother has 3 avocado trees, for instance, in her home, you will still see the grandmothers come with avocado and tell you that their avocado tastes so much better. So you should have that one, So there's, and it's like that small community living, everybody kind of supporting and taking care of each other. So it's not a community garden in the ways that we would do it here, but everyone have gardens around their homes and share whatever excess. So if I got plantain and I have an excess of plantain, maybe I'll sell some or I'll give it to the neighbor who may want some plantain.
And do they trade seeds?
Yes, very freely. What I love is that, you know, one of the challenges that corporations have with farmer seeds is that they say, well, how can you guarantee the viability of the seeds? It's like the farmer isn't going to share a seed that they know doesn't work with another person because it's them, it's about them. I live near you, I am growing corn or whatever I'm growing and the seeds this one, I'm like, oh, you should have some of these seeds because they did so well. I trust that, I believe that, I know that it works. But I think one of the ways that corporations try to debunk a lot of farmer seeds is to say that it hasn't been scientifically tested or whatever, how do we know it works? When farmers generationally, for many years, have been sharing seeds among themselves to be able to grow.
Quick question over this way. I'm here.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry about that. I put my hand up and it brought it. Forget everything. We know land sovereignty is a problem.
Mhm.
So for your grandmother, is it her land? Can it be taken away from her?
So, yes, it can be taken away. So the lands that many women farm, women are not landowners.
Right.
And one of the things in terms of systems is that, you know, there's a community land, right? The idea of a chief previously, this is community land. And we all get to use the land for our needs. It's not owned necessarily by anyone. It gets more complex when you're bringing in sort of colonial structures and now governments are saying, well, this land belongs to us and I'm gonna plant this tig tree here. I don't care that you're growing food here. We're gonna plant this here. This land is owned by this family or this chief or whatever. So it kind of meshes many different systems together and makes it difficult. I'll give you an example in in the Volta region of Ghana, where land is owned by the men only. It cannot be owned by a woman. A husband allows his wife to grow food on the land.
Allows her. Is there a way our advocacy can work on that?
Sorry?
Is there a way our advocacy can work on that? Is there places we can slide in or hit with a hammer?
I think when you're fighting for the right to food, it also includes rural women and rural women farmers and their right and access to land. And again, it goes back to the piece I mentioned, right? If women make up a majority of smallholder farmers that are protecting our biodiversity, right? When we talk about right to food, we cannot do that without talking about women, without talking about women's rights, without talking about farmers' rights. So I think it's all very much interconnected. And this is why for many organizations like La Via Campesina, it's really, really important for them to showcase Indigenous women globally that are doing this work, because there is no right to food without women, and without women like my grandmother, right, who are doing the blunt of the work and taking care of families. A lot of the men that I met on this research journey were focused on either cash crops, what would give them money quick right now, or they were at home when the wife is at the farm doing the work, you know, which is quite interesting. And yet they will fight the women. You know, there was an incident where a woman was, her hand was literally cut off by her husband because she's using the family land. When she was just growing whatever, he was fine with it. The moment she started making money, that became a problem for him, and she became a threat, right? So again, we can't talk about right to food, food sovereignty, food justice without women.
Hi, Alma. There's so many questions I'd love to ask you, but I think, could you talk just a bit about local food systems? We talked about your grandmother and her having her vegetable cart. And we know that
to strengthen, from a local food system perspective. I mean, the pandemic taught us that, right? These imports of Brazilian chicken, it's just crazy. So can you talk a little bit about the local system, where your grandmother lives and?
Thanks. I think when we're talking about the village, Pipiasi, I think, and maybe my mother will even remember, our village deals with drought every year during the Hamatan season. I remember as a child walking long distances to go fetch water, or sometimes you get there and there's a long line. And sometimes it's not even humans that are there. That's the hilarious thing because it takes so long. They put a rock. The rock represents that they were here and they're in line. And it'll go do other things. But and my village, it used to have so much produce, so much food. Right now, we don't have that anymore. When I'm traveling to the village, I literally have to stop on the way to grab the vegetables that I need to take back to the town, which also includes fish, whatever other things that you may need. So in terms of our food security and food sovereignty in that community, it faces multiple different challenges. And there is an influx of foreign foods, majority which are not healthy. Africa is dealing with some of the chronic health outcomes that was seen in the US and in the West, right? Like obesity rates, all of these other heart issues. We're dealing with it because now there's even a KFC in Ghana. There is this noodle called Indomie. Indomie is just chemical-filled food, but we're eating it. We get the Brazilian chicken that's being fed with hormones and whatever else that's brought in. It's no longer about, grabbing one of your chickens and killing it. I remember one of the interesting stories my grandmother told me years ago. We bought frozen chicken, and she asked me, how long has the chicken been dead for? And that was a very interesting question. I'm like, what does this old lady mean? How long has the chicken been dead for? I don't know. And she's like, you don't know and you're eating it? I'm like, in Canada, that's all we eat, dead chicken. And she said, akukofu, which, they understand like dead carcass or whatever. She's like, I will not eat this dead carcass. I'm going to grab one of my chickens and kill it. At least I know where it's been. I know what I'm eating. But there's an influx of that now, right? Like, we're eating a lot of foreign foods, which are unhealthy. So that ecosystem, right, it's struggling. But I think it's also a system that can be, strengthened, because there are farmers who are rejecting this new way of farming and want to continue to farm the old way. Yes, it's backbreaking. Yes, it's hard, but you buying a tractor for a farmer who makes very little, how are they to fix it? Where are they going to get the gasoline from? Right? It's just not even practical in many different ways. Yes. Yes.
I'm from Ghana, so I know this. I don't know if you'd like to share more light on how these small families, even when they grow these crops, they don't tend to eat a lot of them. What they do is that they would like to send them down to the urban areas to sell them for money, because they still need money to pay for other things around themselves. So even if they are getting, like she was asking, do they feed the community with the crops? Sometimes, naturally, they send them down just to make a little bit of money to pay fees and other utilities around. So it makes it quite difficult for them to sometimes even feed their community. But I'll leave it to Oma to share more.
Yes, and I think you heard it too from my grandmother, right? She has to sell some of the food in order to pay for her children's school fees. Right? There's no way that she could have afforded to do that without money. So I think when we're talking local food and local food systems, it's also looking at local markets and how people can generate a bit of revenue to also take care of the other things in their life, like paying for a school fees as well. So it's like, how do we build, you know, a local food system that, that can support communities. So in terms of crisis like what we had with the COVID, right? Or any other crisis where the community is shut down, what happens then, right? To people.
Okay, sorry. See, I'm losing my voice at the end of this conference. Let's take a last question from our people who are on Zoom. This is from Joanne Mulhern. Did you speak with your grandmother and others about climate change and the effects of higher temperatures? Are people finding Are people finding extended higher temperatures exhausting?
Oh. You guys noticed the cassava that she was getting ready. So one of the things I learned is that without rainfall, or if it doesn't rain for a while and it gets really, really hot, and then it rains, like a big dump of rain, it has a huge impact in, for instance, on cassava. And I don't know if you noticed when she was cleaning the things in the middle, some of it was actually not so great because of the shock that the cassava has had with the environment that it's in. So we did talk about that a lot, even though it didn't come up in the film, around climate change and the fact that, you know, it's not raining as much anymore. She will not use the word climate change, but she will say that things have changed. You know, it doesn't rain as it used to anymore, all these other things, but she always equates it to the spraying. For her, it's the spray. The spraying is what's changing the environment, changing the weather, and making it difficult. And she's not wrong. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
It's a small token of our appreciation. This was such a wonderful presentation. I've got a whole big basket of questions. We'll have to spend more time together.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This way.
I just want to say a few things that I've learned. I learned so much just this last 50 minutes. Such a strong woman, your grandmother, you know, I mean, as I was sitting there, some of my questions were about the healthcare system. You know, oh my gosh, you know, I don't know if I could do that. You know, I mean, just, you know, just amazing. And of course, she's just, you know, one of many older women, you know, who are doing that work every day. And it's just, so such a great story and a great reminder to us, of our sisters in Ghana. You know, and just, you know, I love the word DC. Although maybe that's another word we could start to using. We need to understand a little bit more, but, you know, I mean, such a role model. I mean, I really did feel that sense of sisterhood with her. You know, this traditional knowledge, you know, just, you know, how critical, you know, traditional knowledge is, you know, for the future of the food system, you know, in sub-Saharan Africa. The whole notion of the protection of the environment, and I loved what you said, she holds Mother Earth and holds it well, you know, and it's just, you know, and it's a story that we've actually just recently heard from a young graduate student in South Africa too, you know, the role of older women in protecting the environment and providing leadership, and, you know, and so, and it's in so many older women, grandmothers is such a great example. You know, the whole, you know, idea about local food systems, and it, you know, it's so sad to hear, you know, what's happening in northern Ghana in terms of, you know, of the climate and, you know, the challenges that they are facing, and, you know, we're always looking for, you know, stories of how, you know, how that can be strengthened, how people can stay on their land and continue to feed, you know, their families and their communities. And So we'll continue to look to you into the future. Sorry, I think that's me in the mic. Okay, step back. Set my passion back a little bit. And you know, and I think you know, talking, you know, for us is how do we, you know, we need to continue to amplify the voices of older women in Africa. You know, we need to tell their stories, you know, we need to share, you know, how strong they are, they do have the solutions. And the, you know, that Canadians do care, you know, and that's where, you know, we've tried to, you know, just to do so much together over the past year, and certainly hope that continue. And I think, you know, on a personal level, you know, also what I was thinking about as I was watching the video is the relationship between grandmother and granddaughter, you know, and her telling her stories to you, and how important that relationship is, you know, for us as older women with our granddaughters. And of course, you know, we know that's the role of older women across so many cultures is that is sharing of wisdom, passing on the cultural values, and you know, so it was this, it just came out so beautifully in the video. So thank you very much for being with us today. Really appreciate this, and it's just a great way to have you here to close off our conference. So thank you.
Just shutting down the recording. Now I'm just thinking, I'm looking at Sharon.